it's a good bounce back win for us today. I thought we started the game with the right tone on the defensive end, and so that was
Just 2 minutes ago, reports exploded across sports media that Caitlin Clark has officially refused to sign the new collective bargaining agreement deal, and the fallout is absolutely nuclear. Commissioner Cathy Engelbert is reportedly in a state of complete shock. Team USA coach Cheryl Reeve has confirmed the chaos behind closed doors, and the entire league is now staring down the barrel of a full-blown labor war. This isn't a negotiation anymore. This is a revolution, and the WNBA will never be the same. For months, the league's front office operated under one massive, arrogant assumption, that the players would eventually fall in line. They believed that these women, hungry for visibility and grateful just to have a professional league, would accept whatever scraps were thrown their way. They thought they held all the leverage. They thought wrong. What we're witnessing right now is not just a contract dispute. It's a full-scale insurrection, led by a generation of athletes who know exactly what they're worth and refuse to be underpaid any longer. At the center of this storm sits one name, Caitlin Clark. Silent, strategic, and absolutely terrifying to everyone in that league office. The WNBA Players Association didn't just opt out of the current collective bargaining agreement. They did it 2 years early. Then they took it a step further and authorized a potential strike. That's the nuclear option. That's the moment you realize the players aren't bluffing. This isn't about a few percentage points or minor adjustments. This is a complete rejection of the old guard mentality that has ruled women's basketball for decades, and Clark is the unstoppable force driving it all. Let's rewind and understand how we got here. The league was banking on a slow, predictable renegotiation process. Pat the players on the head, give them a small raise, keep the machine running. Business as usual, but they didn't account for the Clark effect. When you bring in a supernova talent, you don't just get a great player. You get supernova-level scrutiny, supernova-level fan engagement, and supernova-level economic power. The front office miscalculated catastrophically. They thought they could control her rise, manage her narrative, and keep the status quo intact. Instead, they handed the players the most powerful bargaining chip in the history of women's sports. Now let's talk numbers, because this is where things get absolutely insane. In 2024, Caitlin Clark alone was responsible for an estimated 26.5% of the WNBA's entire economic activity. Read that again. One rookie, one player out of over 140 in the league drove more than a quarter of the entire business. She transformed the Indiana Fever from a struggling, forgotten franchise into a brand that rivals NBA teams in terms of engagement and merchandise sales. League-wide attendance skyrocketed by over 40%. Television viewership records that had stood untouched for 20 years were shattered on a weekly basis. Sponsors were lining up. Media deals were exploding. The WNBA was printing money. And what was Caitlin Clark's salary under the current deal? $76,000. Let that sink in. The woman responsible for $250 million league's economic boom was being paid less than a mid-level manager at a tech company. The disparity is so grotesque, so undeniably exploitative, that it didn't just anger Clark. It radicalized the entire player base. Because this isn't just about her. It's about what she represents. When Angel Reese, Cameron Brink, and the rest of that historic rookie class look at those numbers, they see a league making millions off their names while telling them the cupboard is bare. They see the private jets the owners finally scrambled to provide, but only after being publicly shamed into it. They see the $2.2 billion media rights deal, and they're asking one simple, dangerous question. Where is our share? That question is what's keeping Cathy Engelbert awake at night, because the players aren't asking anymore. They're demanding. And they have the leverage to flip the entire table before the owners can even sit down to eat. But here's where it gets even more explosive. Late last year, a new league emerged that completely destroyed the WNBA's negotiating power, unrivaled. founded by superstars Brianna Stewart and Nafisa Collier. This 3-on-3 league didn't just offer an alternative. It exposed the WNBA's poverty wages for the entire world to see. Reports surfaced that Unrivaled prepared an offer for Caitlin Clark exceeding $1 million for just a few months of work, plus significant equity in the league itself. $1 million for a fraction of the games. Meanwhile, the WNBA's so-called Supermax salary caps out at around $200,000. How does Commissioner Engelbert look a player in the eye and call that fair? She can't. The Unrivaled threat proved what players have known all along. The money is there. It's just being hoarded at the top. And the be grateful narrative that worked for decades, it's dead, buried, gone. The tension inside the league office reached a boiling point when reports leaked of a private conversation where Engelbert allegedly told players they should be thanking their lucky stars for the media deal she negotiated. That was the match in the powder keg. Players like Nafisa Collier and Kelsey Plum didn't hold back. They publicly criticized the leadership and called for a complete overhaul. The message was clear: the league is succeeding in spite of the front office. Not because of it. The revenue explosion is because of the talent on the floor, specifically the generational talent wearing number 22. The league office is just trying to take credit for a wave they never saw coming. But to truly understand the emotional weight of this standoff, we have to go back to the moment that started the us versus them war, the Olympic snub. The decision by the Team USA Selection Committee, heavily influenced by Coach Cheryl Reeve, to leave Caitlin Clark off the Paris roster wasn't just a roster move. It was a declaration of war by the establishment. It signaled that the old guard wasn't ready to cede power to the newcomer, no matter how many millions of fans she brought with her. The backlash was instantaneous and brutal. Critics called it absurd to leave the most popular female athlete on the planet at home while claiming to want to grow the game. Looking back now, that decision was a catastrophic strategic error. By alienating Clark and her massive fan base, the establishment lost the goodwill that might have smoothed over these contract negotiations. Instead of unity, there's resentment. Instead of collaboration, there's division. Players feel like the powers that be are actively working against their own biggest asset. And here's the irony. Cheryl Reeve is now watching from the sidelines as the league she represents threatens to implode. The gatekeeping mentality that justified the Olympic snub is the exact same mentality trying to suppress player wages. The old argument was always wait your turn, pay your dues, respect the hierarchy. But the Clark economy doesn't care about hierarchy. It cares about demand. And right now, the demand is for a league that treats its stars like superstars, not like entry-level employees. So, what exactly are the players demanding? They want a revenue share closer to 50%, a figure that would fundamentally change the business model of women's sports. They want an equity-based system where player salaries rise automatically with league growth, ensuring that a situation where a billion-dollar asset gets paid $76,000 never happens again. But it's not just about money. Throughout the 2024 season, we watched Caitlin Clark get targeted physically on the court. Hard fouls, non-basketball plays, a general sense of hazing that the league did almost nothing to stop. The commissioner's initial silence on this, combined with her clumsy attempt to frame online toxicity as just fan passion during a now infamous CNBC interview, further alienated the players. Why would anyone sign a long-term deal with an organization that refuses to protect them? The union is demanding better travel standards, full-time security, and professional medical treatment. These demands are directly linked to the visuals we saw all year. Players mobbed in commercial airports, cheap shot on national television while referees swallowed their whistles. The trust is broken, and money alone won't fix it. This brings us to the nuclear winter scenario. The strike authorization vote is the ultimate leverage play. By opting out and threatening a work stoppage, the players are saying they're willing to burn the season down rather than accept the current terms. Imagine a 2026 season without Caitlin Clark, without Angel Reese, without Aya Wilson. The league's momentum, which is skyrocketing right now, would hit a brick wall. The TV networks who just signed billion-dollar checks expecting record ratings would be furious. For the first time in history, the labor force has the ability to bankrupt the ownership. If the players walk, the revenue stops. And unlike the NBA, where teams have decades of reserves and billion-dollar valuations independent of current stars, the WNBA's newfound profitability is fragile. It relies entirely on current hype, and the players control the product. There's also a fascinating generational divide at play. Veteran players who spent years flying coach, staying in budget hotels, and playing in rec centers for meager pay built the foundation of this league. But the house is being renovated by the rookies. For a long time, there was tension, even jealousy over the attention Clark received. But in this labor battle, they've found common ground. The veterans realize the Clark salary cap holds them all down. If the rising tide doesn't lift all boats, nobody sails. This unity is what makes the strike threat so dangerous. The owners expected to divide the locker room, to pit jealous veterans against wealthy rookies. But the lowball offers had the opposite effect. They united the players in disgust. And then there's Caitlin Clark's silent power play. The clock is ticking toward the expiration of current terms, and the silence from her camp is the loudest noise of all. By not publicly committing to the WNBA's narrative, by keeping the unrivaled option in her back pocket, by letting the union fight this war with her economic data as ammunition, Clark is exerting more power than any commissioner ever could. She's checkmated the league. They can't market the future without her. They can't afford her under the old rules. The shock Engelbert is feeling is the realization that the era of control is over. The athletes are now the CEOs of their own brands, and the league is just a platform, one that's in danger of being left behind if it doesn't modernize rapidly. Consider what the players are actually rejecting. The current CBA has a prioritization clause that punishes players for playing overseas, forcing them to choose between making real money in Europe or playing in the WNBA. For years, players hated this rule but had no power to fight it. Now, with Unrivaled offering a domestic alternative that pays huge money, that clause looks ridiculous. Players are refusing to be locked into a league that pays part-time wages while demanding full-time exclusivity. The commissioner's shock comes from realizing the WNBA is no longer the only game in town. The monopoly is over. For years, the WNBA operated as a subsidized entity, supported largely by NBA financial backing. That created a culture where players were expected to be thankful for whatever they got. But 2024 changed the math forever. When regular season games are drawing millions of viewers and outperforming Major League Baseball and NHL games consistently, the charity argument dies. Players know the Indiana Fever's merchandise sales alone probably covered multiple rosters. Yet, those players still have to play overseas in the off-season just to make ends meet. That's the fundamental contradiction. You cannot have a major league product with minor league wages. The targeting of Clark this season is the perfect metaphor. On the court, veterans tried to welcome her with physical play, trying to prove she wasn't special. She took the hits, got up, and broke every record. Now, in the boardroom, owners are trying to give her the rookie treatment with the contract, trying to prove the system is bigger than the player. But just like on the court, that strategy is failing. Clark and the union are absorbing pressure and firing back with record-breaking leverage. The refusal to sign, the strike threat, the exploration of other leagues. It's the off-court equivalent of a logo three-pointer. A move that says, I can do things you didn't think were possible. And here's the ultimate trump card, the fans. The Caitlin Clark stans and millions of new eyes on the sport aren't loyal to the WNBA Shield. They're loyal to the players. If Clark took a year off or played exclusively in Unrivaled, those fans would follow. The WNBA knows this. Disney and Amazon didn't pay billions for the WNBA logo. They paid for the Caitlin Clark show. This puts Engelbert in an impossible bind. give in to union demands and bankrupt the old model, or hold the line, cause a strike and destroy the value of the media deal she just signed. It's lose-lose for the front office and win-win for the players as long as they stay united. The WNBPA opted out in late 2024, setting up a showdown for the 2025 to 2026 cycle. The upcoming season will be played under a cloud of uncertainty. Every interview, every press conference will be dominated by money questions. Every time Clark steps on the court, the ticker tape in owners' heads will count revenue she generates versus pennies they're paying her. The PR battle is already lost. The public overwhelmingly sides with the players. The narrative of greedy owners versus exploited stars is easy to sell, especially when the salary cap for an entire team is less than a single NBA bench player salary. Cheryl Reeve, who doubles as Minnesota Lynx coach and Olympic team head, represents the system being challenged. When she left Clark off the roster citing experience and chemistry, many saw it as protectionism, rewarding veterans who'd been part of the system for years. Now that system is crumbling. The fact that the commissioner and coaches are shocked shows how out of touch they were. They thought they could control the pace of change, slowly integrate Clark into existing structures. But Clark is a disruptor. She doesn't integrate. She takes over. The contract negotiations are following the same path as her playing career. Fast, aggressive, record-breaking. This refusal isn't just about a contract. It's about refusing a lifestyle, refusing to be marketed as a superstar but paid like a substitute teacher, refusing to fly commercial after double overtime games, squeezing 6'4" frames into economy seats, refusing to let the league keep 90% of profits while players take 100% of physical risk. The CBA negotiations are simply the battlefield. For the first time, the soldiers have more firepower than the generals. As we look at potential fallout, implications extend far beyond basketball. This is a test case for women's sports globally. Can a league pivot from charity case business model to big business model without collapsing under its own growing pains? Players are betting the product is too valuable to fail, that owners will eventually blink, that fear of losing Clark billions will force the league to open the checkbook like never before. And they're probably right. The WNBA cannot afford a lockout. They cannot let air out of the balloon when it's soaring highest. The momentum is too precious to waste on labor disputes. The coming months will be high-stakes chicken. The league will likely leak negative stories about union demands, paint players as greedy or unrealistic, suggest the league is losing money. But here's the truth. Caitlin Clark just refused the deal. The commissioner is shocked. Team USA coach confirmed the chaos, and the WNBA, as we know it, is over. A new era is being born, and it's being born in fire.